The year is 1954. Imagine a terrified family living in the only home they've ever known for their entire lives. Scared and terrified because they've heard that shortly and soon after, foreign soldiers are about to sweep over their small island, through their fishing village, and conquer it in the name of some kind of conflict they don't understand and that they don't have any part of. And recently, they've lost all hope. Because they've just watched the last boats leave their island. The last boats carrying away soldiers who were supposed to protect them and who carried none of the civilians away from the island. And they know, sitting there desperately, this may be the last of them. Now, this is not a fictional scenario. This is actually a real story. And this is the story of the first Taiwan Strait crisis in 1954. And this small crisis, part of a nearly over half a century long conflict, it centers around the two states of China and Taiwan. And I'm here today to talk to you about why this small conflict, which few of us think about and even fewer of us talk about, may be the most important conflict of the 21st century. Now, if you're not like me and you didn't sleep through all of American history because it was right after lunch, you're in a food coma, and it was hard to pay attention, you may have heard a little bit about China and Taiwan and why they're relevant. You see, the conflict between these stretches to 1949. In 1949, the Nationalist Party, which once controlled China, was defeated by the Communist Party in a decade-long civil war that claimed the lives of over 10 million people, civilians and soldiers alike. Now, after this conflict, the Nationalist Party fled to Taiwan, and in doing so, gave away China to the Communist Party. Now, this isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing, because the Nationalist Party at the time, though claiming to be democratic, wasn't really the best kind of party out there. They were democratic the way that North Korea also calls itself democratic. So, a lot of you may ask, why should we care about this conflict in 1949? How does this affect me as a person? And what matters is that since 1949, there have been many crises since then, collectively termed the Taiwan Strait crises. Since that time, there have been numerous small engagements, missiles fired, lives lost, and diplomatic crises. Now, again, you may wonder, well, this is just some small event in the South China Sea. Why does it matter? Why do I care? And it's because of recent developments and how the U.S. plays in this conflict. You see, China and Taiwan may be at war, but the U.S. is not necessarily a bystander here. In the past, the U.S. has declared that it will defend Taiwan in the case of any Chinese attempt to finish the Civil War. And recent developments may indicate that this kind of war is closer than we may think it is. You know, about a month ago, Taiwan underwent its parliamentary elections, and in a really unprecedented move, the Democratic Progressive Party defeated the Nationalist Party in a massive election that saw the Nationalist Party lose both the presidency and the legislature. Now, why this is important is because, unlike the Nationalist Party, the Democratic Progressive Party promotes a stance of pro-Taiwanese independence. In this conflict, they say we should be our own country. We shouldn't try to claim China or try to reclaim it. We should be our own unified Taiwan. Now, why this is bad is because in the past, China has declared that it will invade Taiwan if Taiwan ever declares independence. Now, a lot of you are thinking, oh, those Chinese, they're just, they would never actually do something. That would be crazy. But recent events say otherwise. In 1998, the third Taiwan Strait crisis erupted because there was a hint that a Taiwanese president who may be inclined to promote independence was going to be elected. In response, China mobilized its soldiers and launched missiles over Taiwan. The only thing that stopped the crisis, the U.S. President Clinton sent 2 entire U.S. carrier strike groups to patrol the air to prevent any kind of invasion or any kind of conflict. And many of these crises have been solved similar ways, with military force. But many of them have been solved also through diplomatic means. Now, why this is relevant today is because recently, China has been building up its military presence throughout the South China Sea. You may have read that China is constructing man-made islands, flying aircraft through the area, enforcing no-fly zones, and moving missile batteries and artillery into the area, all of which are in striking range of Taiwan. Now, this may be due to the fact of the recent elections, but many have been pointing to this kind of development occurring for a long time, as if China has been planning this kind of event. So, if China actually moves, then the U.S. intervenes in the conflict, and the U.S. gets involved in the war with China, which leads to another world war, and maybe a nuclear confrontation, which, if you ask me, is a kind of undesirable outcome. I kind of like the world less irradiated, if it's all right. So, the point of this talk today, and why I'm talking to you, is because we have to understand that even if there are conflicts out there that we may not be thinking about, it doesn't mean that they don't occur. Throughout the world, there are so many small conflicts and small groups who may not have the biggest stage to talk about, unlike me, who I can have an opportunity to tell you all about this kind of thing. From the Kurds in Central Asia, to conflicts involving Native American groups throughout the United States, to many conflicts throughout the world. There are so many small groups out there, and small conflicts that could have massive ramifications. And a lot of you may be asking, well, what can we do about these kinds of situations? What can I, as a typical, well, not so typical considering you're Stanford students, American citizen, do about these things? And the answer is, it doesn't take military force. It doesn't necessarily take diplomatic actions. What it takes is small citizens voting and participating in politics and whatnot in order to make real change happen. Military force can lead to military conflict, but in the past, just as many crises involving Taiwan and China and across the world have been solved through words. Now, looking across and hearing the amazing people who have spoken today, I realize and I see that many of us here will become the next diplomats, the ambassadors, the politicians, the scientists who will really change the world, who can show that they have an impact and stop any kind of world war, any kind of crisis occur in the future. But even if you're not inclined towards those goals, simply the act of voting, participating in politics, campaigning, these have real effects on who joins office and who really changes the world. Now, given the interesting range of candidates running for this election year, it's clear that whoever is elected could have massive ramifications for the entire world's foreign policy. And it's hard for us to imagine because in the United States, we're relatively privileged. We don't have to, despite what Donald Trump says, fear some kind of foreign invasion. We've never had the fear of missiles landing from the sky or a foreign power invading us hang over our heads. We've never had the fear of a family watching the last boats leave the island, knowing that it may be the end of them. And because of that, we forget about so many people throughout the world. And we forget about the impact that we can have simply when we care and simply when we choose to do something. Now, a lot of you may be wondering why I have such a strong personal interest, why I seem to know so much of this conflict. Well, part of that reason goes back to the story at the beginning. Now, the families I was telling you about did wait. But eventually, the boats came back. Under a joint effort between the US Navy and the Taiwanese Navy under the command of President Eisenhower, US Navy ships and other ships came for the villagers and the people living on these islands. You see, these islands were controlled by Taiwan at the time, and China was planning on invading them and seizing them for their control because they were a very important strategic objective. But the ships came back because the soldiers on them had pleaded and they had refused to do anything unless their families, the villagers they had left behind, were taken with them. And actions of other people, public opinion said, we must save these people. These people should not be left behind. And these soldiers, they made a real change. They made an impact. And when the boats came back, they came back for the villagers. And following a week-long diplomatic standoff, the people of these islands were evacuated to safety, and they were brought to Taiwan. They had lost their home. They had lost everything they had ever known. But at the very least, they were alive and they were safe. Now, two of those families who left on those boats had a teenage boy and a teenage girl. These people would eventually grow up to become my grandparents. And my paternal grandparents survived this event, the first Taiwan Strait crisis, and eventually made their way to Taiwan. And obviously they survived because, I'm standing here today, I'm not dead. So the reason why this impacts me so deeply is because this is the story of my family. Every time that I hear about some incident regarding Taiwan and China, military buildup or blustering in words, I have a little bit of fear because almost my entire extended family lives in Taiwan. At any single moment, everything could change because of some military invasion, some misplaced word or something like that, or simply because people just don't care. Thank you all for listening, and thank you all for caring, and I hope you all take this lesson to heart.